Well, the last time we looked at the purpose of Jesus' life, and we got a peek into the very reason that he came to earth. We left him at the Mount of Transfiguration, and he was just about to turn south and head for his death after spending 2.5 years in the Galilee region. And this week we're going to begin the story of Jesus' suffering and the beginning of the fulfillment of why he came. We're going to look at the intense suffering that he went through before he was so cruelly executed. In the next episode, we'll go on to look at that execution or that sacrifice, and there will probably be 1 or 2 significant surprises for most people listening. But for now, we're going to focus on the last week of Jesus' life here on earth, at least his final week in which he was clothed in a body just like yours and mine. He did spend some more time on earth in his new resurrected body. Actually, I'd like to start just a little earlier than his last week and take us back to a very real place in the north of Israel at the foot of Mount Hermon. In Jesus' time, this place was called Caesarea Philippi, and today it's known as BANIAS. It's right up north, as you can see from this map. Now, BANIAS is a Pantheon. Pantheon is a Greek word that simply means many gods. Pan, many, theon, gods. A place where they worshipped many gods. And as you stand there today, you can see the porticos carved into the rock face where all these dead gods were placed. Virtually every god of the Roman Empire could be found at this place. And just before Jesus headed to his death, he brought his disciples here and he asked them a really intriguing question. He said to them, "Who do you think I am?" What an extraordinary place to ask that particular question, surrounded by all these stone gods. The architect of our universe asked them, "Who do you think I am?" Now, for very good reasons, Jesus had never really told them who he was. It was like there was a great secret. Even the demons were kept silent and ordered not to speak when they said too much about who Jesus was. And the disciples answered him. They said, "Some say this and some say that." But it was Peter that finally came out with it. "I know who you are. You are our Messiah, the Son of the living God." "Blessed are you, for no man has revealed this to you except my Father in heaven," Jesus told him. Well, now that this matter was settled and the dots could be connected, the story was beginning to unfold. It was time to do what he'd come for, to become the scapegoat, the one who would provide justice by taking on himself our punishment that we deserve. He was to now bear what we deserved. And it says that he set his face like flint to go to Jerusalem, knowing full well what was set before him. Well, he first went to Bethany, which is just here on the map, and from Bethany it's not too far to walk to Jerusalem. And it was not long before he and his disciples reached the top of the Mount of Olives, and there laid out below was the city of the great King, the city that God loved and God still does love. And as Jesus took in the sight, we're told that he wept. He wept for the city and he wept for her inhabitants. Word had got out that this famous teacher was coming. Oppressed by the Romans, the Jews were fervently praying for their Messiah. They were waiting for Messiah ben David, Messiah, the son of David, who would come as a conquering king and save them from their oppressors, save them from their trouble, save them from the Romans. And this explains the cry, Hosanna. Hosanna means God save us. The tragedy was that their Messiah was indeed standing before them, but he was first to come as Messiah ben Yosef, Messiah son of Joseph, a suffering servant, before he was to come as conquering king. He entered through these gates, the Golden Gate. This has been bricked up by the Muslims today. They know the Jewish scriptures that foretell his coming through this very gate, and how strange that they believe a brick wall can stand against our hero. Well, the fickle and misunderstanding crowd soon turned against him as he turned left and into the temple courts, attacking the Jewish moneylenders, rather than turning right and dealing with the Romans in Fort Antonio. His days were numbered, but not by the Jews or the Romans, but by the Father and the Son together. It was them that had come up with this plan for the salvation of men and women. A short time later, as they partook of the Pesach, the Passover meal, he was to pass some bread to Judas of Kerrioth, or Judas Iscariot as we call him. This piece of bread has a special place in a Passover meal. It's known as Hillel's sop, and it's always given by the host to somebody that he dearly loves. Isn't that meaningful? Later that evening, they all took a walk. Now in the valley between Jerusalem and the Mount of Olives lies the olive groves of Gethsemane. And Jesus asked his disciples to pray, and then he himself withdrew a short way to speak with his dad, the only one that really understood. His anxiety was so great that blood burst out from his forehead. Now interestingly, this is not uncommon. It would happen in the World War I trenches. It happens to people facing execution. The capillaries are so close at the forehead that they burst at such times of great stress. Jesus was under a great burden and a great stress. Time and time again, his disciples would fall asleep, much to Jesus' distress. Finally, the time came for him to be betrayed, but even now his kindness shone through as he healed a Roman guard. He was taken up these very steps, recently uncovered, 2,000-year-old steps, to the villa of Joseph ben Caiaphas. It was at the top of these steps that Jesus heard a cockerel crowing. He turned in concern for his dear friend Peter, who broke down in tears when he realized what had just happened. I'm sure you know the story. First he was taken to Annas. Now Annas was the father-in-law of Caiaphas and was a previous high priest. And Jesus was questioned by him. "Why do you question me?" Jesus answered. "All that I've said was in public and at synagogues. It was heard by many people. Let them testify." Immediately an officer struck him, and he responded, "If I've spoken wrongly, then testify that I've spoken wrongly. But why do you strike me?" He was then sent to Caiaphas, the high priest. Here he kept largely silent. And when asked the direct question, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of God?" he simply answered, "You have said it, and now I say it. The Son of Man will soon be sitting at the right hand of God." And with these brave words his fate was sealed. They spat in his face and struck him, ridiculed and challenged him. The high priest tore his clothes and called for his death. Now two great powers, who were normally living at a place called Caesarea Maritime, had come to Jerusalem as they always did during the feasts. Pontius Pilate was one of them, and Herod Antipas, one of Herod the Great's sons, king of the region. First, Jesus was taken to this place. This is the judgment gate of Pontius Pilate. "Are you the king of the Jews?" "It is as you say," Jesus answered. And Pilate marvelled at him and could find no fault in him. There was a man in captivity, however, that deserved punishment. His name too was Jesus. Jesus Barabbas. Did you know that? Interestingly, Barabbas means son of the Father, Bar Abba. And Jesus Barabbas, Jesus son of the Father, who deserved to die, was let off so that our Jesus, our hero, Jesus, the Son of the Father, could take his place. What an intriguing picture. "We want his blood," the crowd shouted. The soldiers now too began to mock him. During all of this, he was sent here to the Jerusalem palace of Herod Antipas. Herod was delighted. He'd never met this famous teacher before, and he wanted to hear him speak. He wanted to see a miracle and was to be bitterly disappointed. It says that he questioned Jesus with many words, but Jesus answered him with not a single word. silent, like a lamb to the slaughter. It says that in the face of this silence, Herod and his men of war treated Jesus with contempt and mocked him before sending him back to Pontius Pilate. We'll continue this story in the next episode, but this period of time following Jesus' arrival at the city is often referred to as the time of Jesus' passion. Now, passion is a misunderstood word. It comes from the Latin word passio, and it simply means great suffering or intense suffering. It's interesting, isn't it, that there are times when we are called to suffer. Peter tells us that we should rejoice when we share in Jesus' suffering. Paul says in Philippians 3 that all things are rubbish compared to the surpassing greatness of knowing Christ, that I might know him and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship or the sharing in his suffering. What is also a great comfort is to know that he understands our suffering. For those that have been falsely accused, and there are not many things that are more deeply damaging than false accusation, he's been there before you, and you share in his suffering. For those that suffer occasionally with anxiety, understand that he sweat drops of blood in great anguish, and he understands. For those that understand what it is to be betrayed and to be denied, then you understand what Jesus went through, and he understands what you go through. Take courage and strength from this. He was mocked and scoffed, abused and beaten. Our Messiah understands our suffering. And for those that suffer for their faith, we are to consider this a pure joy. I've heard sermons that talk about the problem of suffering, but the writers of the New Testament considered it a privilege, a joy to suffer for Christ. I'd like to draw this to a close with Paul, not the apostle, a man called Paul Schneider. He was a pastor in Berlin, and he dared to preach against Hitler. And his congregation begged him to stop because they didn't want to lose him. And one night at 3 o'clock in the morning, the Gestapo came and bundled him into a lorry. He went off smiling. He was taken to Buchenwald concentration camp, and because he tried to protect some Jews who were being whipped, they strung him up by his thumbs and whipped him instead. Over time, they deliberately starved him to death, and they put him in a coffin and sent him back to his wife and his young son, saying that he died of pneumonia. You can read today the letters that he sent to his wife, many of them. And these are written down in a book called The Pastor of Buchenwald. They're full of two words, joy and gratitude. I'm filled with such joy and I'm filled with such gratitude to God, he would say. He's become a hero of mine, the pastor of Buchenwald, Schneider. And he shows us a dimension to the suffering of Christ. If we suffer, then let us lift our eyes to Jesus, the author and the perfecter of our faith, counting it all joy that he is able to perfect our faith through tough times as well as good times. He's promised to deliver a clean and perfect bride, and has shown us through his own example how we're to respond if we suffer. I don't know about you, but when I consider all that he went through for me, all that he suffered on my behalf, that even today he's interceding on my behalf, I don't know whether to weep in humility or to shout in rejoicing. Jesus was very honest with us. He said that in the world we will have big trouble or great trouble, but he said, be of good cheer, for I have overcome. Of course, just as the sufferings of Christ are ours in abundance, so also our comfort is abundant through Christ. Well, let's leave it there and come back next time to talk about Jesus' sacrifice, what actually did happen, and what it means to us today. A few surprises in store. God bless.